Elon, I, the Tetragrammaton, the Lord God Most High, I do exercise and powerfully command thee, O Spirit. Elon, I, the Tetragrammaton, the Lord God Most High, I do exercise and powerfully command.
In the dark shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read the ancient tomes. The order of the Abracast. We are the brave and the bold. Occult, history, conspiracy, and violence.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Abracast. I'm running a little bit late on my recording schedule, so I thought I would just knock this one out live. So yes, this is being recorded Sunday morning, broadcast out across the universe via the internet. So I don't know if this is going to be something that's going to keep happening or not. So just try to roll with the punches. If something sounds different, it is this new thing. Anyhow, it does not stop me from having my morning gin jihad. And this evening, or this morning I should say, we're going to be talking about continuing our journey through Exodus. And we just started with the Hebrews entering the desert, and they started to get hungry and whining and complaining, and God was like, all right, I'll give you this manna. So he gave them like magic cookies or bread or something, and there's a whole system involved in how they're supposed to be gathering these things, and they get extra manna on Friday, so they don't have to gather it on their Sabbath, which is Saturday, and that way they can dedicate their Sabbath to studying the Torah, which I believe is going to come into play here as we get farther into the stories that we're going to be talking about today. So I'm going to hit up the Bible, my red letter, real quick. Just to kind of set where we are in the story, and then I'll move to Ginsburg's Legends of the Jews as per normal. And the people, this is Genesis 16:31, the people of Israel called the bread manna, and it was white like coriander seed and tasted like wafers made with honey. And Moses said, this is what the Lord has commanded. Take an omer of manna and keep it for the generations to come, so that they could see the bread when I gave you to eat in the desert, when I brought you out of Egypt. So Moses said to Aaron, take a jar and put an omer of manna in it, then place it before the Lord to be kept for the generations to come. And as the Lord commanded Moses, Aaron put the manna in front of the testimony, that it might be kept. The Israelites ate manna for 40 years until they came to the land that was settled. They ate manna until they reached the border of Canaan. An omer, a little footnote here, an omer is 1/10 of an ephah. So, there. Let's switch over to Ginsburg, Legend of the Jews. Relieved as they were of all the cares of sustenance through the gift of manna. It was plenty the duty of the Israelites to devote themselves exclusively to the study of the Torah. When therefore they slackened in the performance of this duty, punishment in the form of lack of water immediately overtook them. This was the first time that they'd actually experienced this want, for at Mara, nothing more than alarm that this need may come upon them has caused them to murmur and complain. In their distress, they once more unreasonably cast reproaches upon their leader and disputed with him, saying, "Wherefore is this, children, that thou hast brought us up out of Egypt to kill us and our children and our cattle with thirst?" Moses replied, "As often as you quarrel with me, you tempt God. But God performeth wonders and excellent deeds for you. As often as you dispute with me, that his name may sound in glory throughout the world." In spite of the injury that they had done to him, Moses prayed to God that he might aid them in their distress and also stand by him. "O Lord of the world," he said, "I am surely doomed to die. Thou biddest me not to be offended with them, but if I obey thy words, I shall certainly be killed by them." God, however, replied, "Try thou to act like me. As I returned good for evil, so do thou. Return to them good for evil, and forgive their trespass, and go on before the people, and we shall see who dares touch thee." Hardly had Moses shown himself to the people when all of them rose reverently from their seats, whereupon God said to Moses, "How often have I told thee not to be angry with them, but to lead them as a shepherd leads his flock? For it is their sake that I have set thee on this height. And only for their sake wilt thou find grace, goodwill, and mercy in my sight." There you go. That's pretty good leadership pointer there. Don't be angry with them, but lead them. Emotionally disinvest, check your ego, all that sort of. Don't take it personally, all that sort of stuff. When God bade him to go with some elders to the rock on Horeb and fetch water out of it, the elders were to accompany him there, that they might be convinced that he was not bringing water from a well, but smiting it from a rock. To accomplish this miracle, God bade him to smite the rock with his rod, and that people labored under the impression that this rod could only bring destruction. For through its agency, Moses had brought the 10 plagues upon the Egyptians in Egypt and at the Red Sea. Now they were to see that it could work good also. Upon God's bidding, Moses told the people to choose from which rock they wished the water to flow. And hardly had Moses touched with his sapphire rod and the rock which they had chosen, when plenteous water flowed from it in the spot where this occurred. God called Massa and Meribah, because Israel had tried their God, saying, "If God is Lord over all of us, if he satisfies our needs and will further show us that he knows our thoughts, then we will serve him, but not otherwise." The water that flowed for them on this spot served not only as a relief for their present need, but on the occasion there was revealed to them a well of water, which did not abandon them in all their 40 years wandering, but accompanied them on their marches. A moving well, brilliant. God wrought this great miracle for the merits of the prophetess Miriam. Wherefore also it was called Miriam's well. This well dated back to the beginning of the world, for God created this in the second day of creation, and at one time it was in the possession of Abraham, and it was this same well that Abraham demanded back from Abimelech, god of the Philistines, after the king's servants had violently taken it away. But when Abimelech pretended not to know anything about it, saying, I wot not hath done this thing, Abraham said, Thou and I will send sheep to the well, and he shall be declared the rightful owner of the well, for whose sheep the water will spout forth to water them. And continued Abraham, from that time, from that same well, shall the seventh generation after me, the wanderers of the desert, draw their supply. So I keep pointing this out. I feel like I keep pointing it out ad nauseum, but it's really jumping out to me that this story is really, as much as it is, about God, is his role of, the God of the patriarchs, or however you want to say it. It's God. It's like this wild Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure thing where he sets up all these things in prehistory that these folks that are wandering the desert on his behalf sort of will need. And so I keep pointing out, like I said, ad nauseum. I'm sure you're probably like, I get it, move on. But this is God showing off his role as sort of the God of time. All the way back on the second day of creation, he's like, oh shit, my folks are going to need this, super dependable well of water. When after all these Rube Goldbergian-esque events happen to them, he's like, they're going to find themselves in slavery in Egypt, and I'm going to have to get them to walk through the desert for 40 fucking years, and I better just build this well now before I forget later. This well was the same shape of a sieve-like rock, out of which water gushes forth from its spout. It followed them on their wanderings uphill and down dale, and whether they halted it halted too. And it settled opposite of the tabernacle, whereupon the leaders of the 12 tribes would appear, each with his staff, and chant the words to the well. Spring up, O well, sing ye unto it. Nobles of the people digged it by the direction of the lawgiver with their staves. Then the water would gush forth from the depths of the well and shoot up high as pillars, and then discharge itself into the great streams that were navigable. And on these rivers the Jews sailed to the oceans and hauled all the treasures of the world therefrom. Different parts of the camp were separated by these rivers, so that women visiting each other were obliged to make use of ships, and the water discharged itself beyond the encampment, where it surrounded a great plain, in which grew every conceivable kind of plant and tree. And these trees, owing to the miraculous water, daily bore fresh fruits. This well brought fragrant herbs with it, so that the women had no need of perfumes on the march, for the herbs they gathered served the purpose. This well furthermore threw down soft, fragrant kinds of grass that served the pleasant couches for the poor, and that had no pillows or bedcloths. Upon the entrances to the Holy Land, this well disappeared, and it was hidden in a certain spot of the Sea of Tiberias. Standing upon Carmel and looking down over the sea, one can notice their sieve-like rock. And that is the well of Miriam. Once upon a time, it happened that a leper bathed at this place of the Sea of Tiberias, and had hardly come in contact with the waters of Miriam's well, when he was instantly healed. That's interesting. A bunch of things are rolling around in my head about, creation, and then the flood myth, where it wasn't just rain falling from the sky. Water was actually also released from the depths of the earth to contribute to the flood waters. So I'm wondering if this well might tie into this a little bit, and these little controlled floods that they're using to traverse parts of this massive camp, and also get fruits and vegetables and herbs and stuff. So, so now they have manna and they have all the water they could possibly use. But like I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, part of the deal with the manna was that they dedicate the Sabbath to studying the Torah, studying their faith, contemplating the God of time. So we're going to run into this problem here with Amalek. As a punishment, because they had not sufficient faith in God, and they had doubted whether he could fulfill their wishes, he had grown negligent. And had grown negligent in the study of the Torah, and in observance with the laws of God. God turned Amalek against them during their sojourn in Rephidim, where they had committed these sins. God dealt with them as did that man with his son, whom he bore through the river on his shoulders. Whenever the child saw something desirable, he said, "Father, buy it for me." And he fulfilled the child's wish, and after the son had it this way, received many beautiful things from his father. And he called to a passing stranger with these words, and he said, "Hast thou perhaps seen my father?" Then indignantly the father said to his son, "O thou fool, thou sittest on my shoulder. All that thou didst desire did I procure for thee, and now dost thou ask of that man, Hast thou seen my father?" Thereupon the father threw the child off his shoulder, and a dog came and bit him. So did Israel fare. When they moved out of Egypt, God enveloped them in 7 clouds of glory. And they wished for bread, and he gave them manna. And they wished for flesh, and he gave them all quails. And after their wishes they had been granted, they began to doubt, saying, "Is the Lord among us or not?" And then God answered, "You doubt my power. So surely as you live shall you discover it. The dog will soon bite you." And then came Amalek. This enemy of Israel bore the name Amalek to denote the rapidity of which he moved against Israel, for like a swarm of locusts he flew upon them. And the name furthermore designates the purpose of this enemy. He came to suck the blood out of Israel. This Amalek was the son of Eliphaz, the firstborn son of Esau. Oh, here we go, back to the old book. And although the descendants of Jacob had been weaker and more insignificant in earlier times, Amalek had left them in peace, for he had excellent reasons to delay his attack. God had revealed to Abraham that his seed would have to serve in the land of the Egyptians, and he had put the payments of his debt upon Isaac, and after his death upon Jacob and his descendants. And the wicked Amalek now said to himself, "If I destroy Jacob and his descendants, God will impose the Egyptian bondage upon me, grandsons of Esau, descendants of Abraham." Therefore he kept himself in restraint for as long as Israel dwelt in Egypt, but only after their bondage predicted to the seed of Abraham had been served in full did he set out to accomplish the war of annihilation against Israel, which his grandfather Esau had enjoined upon him. No sooner had he heard of Israel's departure from Egypt than he set out against them and met them by the Red Sea. I'm sorry, I just got to take notes real quick. I got to remember to look something up. There indeed he could work them no ill, for Moses uttered against him the ineffable name, the Tetragrammaton. So great was his confusion that he was forced to retreat without having effected his object. Then, for some time, he tried, lying hidden in ambush. And in this wise molesting Israel. But as at length he gave up the game of hide and seek, with a bold front revealed himself as the open enemy of Israel. Not alone, however, did he himself declare war upon Israel, but he also seduced all the heathen nations to assist him in his enterprise against Israel. Although these declined to war upon Israel, feeling that they might have to fare like the Egyptians, they agreed to follow the plan of Amalek. He said, follow my expedition should Israel conquer me. There will still be plenty of time for you to flee, but should success crown my attempt, join your fate to mine in my undertaking against Israel. So Amalek now marched from his settlement in Seir, which was no less than 400 parsangs away from the encampment of the Jews. And although 5 nations, the Hittites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, and the Amorites, and the Canaanites, had their dwellings between his home and the camp of the Jews, he insisted upon being the first to declare war upon Israel. God punished Israel, who had shown themselves an ungrateful people, by sending against them the enemy that was ungrateful too, never recalling that he owed his life to the sons of Jacob, who had him in their power after their brilliant victory over Esau and his followers. Sorry, I gotta take more notes. In his expedition against Israel, he made use of his kinsmen before going over to open attack, and he lured many unsuspecting Jews to death by kindly words. He had fetched from Egypt the table of descent of the Jews, for every Jew had there to mark his name on the bricks produced by him. Here we go with the bricks again. These lists lay in the Egyptian archives, familiar with the names of the different Jewish families. Amalek appeared before the Jewish camp, and calling the people by name, he invited them to leave their camp and to come out to him. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, etc., etc., he would call out, "Come to me, your brother, and transact a business with me." Those who had answered the enticing call found certain death at his hands. And not only did Amalek kill them, but he also mutilated their corpses, following the example of his grandsire Esau, by cutting off certain parts of the body and throwing it towards heaven with the mocking words, "Here shall thou have what thou desirest." And in this way he did jeer at the token of the Abrahamic covenant. So they cut their dicks off. They cut their dicks off and threw them into the sky. Oh, so long as the Jews remained within the encampment, he could, of course, do them no harm. For the clouds enveloped them, and under this shelter they were as well fortified as a city that is surrounded by a solid wall. The cloud, however, covered those only who were pure, but the unclean had to stay beyond it until they were cleansed by a ritual bath, and these Amalek caught, and he killed the sinners too, particularly the tribe of Dan, who were all worshippers of idols, were not protected by the cloud, and therefore exposed to the attacks of Amalek. Moses did not himself set out to battle against a dangerous foe of Israel, but he sent his servant Joshua, and for good reason. Moses knew that only the descendant of Rachel, like the Ephraimite Joshua, could conquer the descendants of Esau. All the sons of Jacob had taken part in the unbrotherly act of selling Joseph as a slave. Hence, none of their descendants might stand up in battle against the descendant of Esau. For they who had themselves acted unnaturally to a brother could hardly hope for God's assistance in a struggle with the unbrotherly Edomites. Only the descendants of Joseph, the man who had been generous and good to his brothers, might hope that God would grant them aid against the unbrotherly descendants of Esau. In many other respects, too, Joseph was an opposite of Esau, and his services stood his descendants in good stead in their battles against the descendants of Esau. Was the firstborn of his father. But through these evil deeds, he lost his birthright. Joseph, on the other hand, was the youngest of his father's sons. And through his good deeds, he found worthy of and enjoying the rights of the firstborn son. Now, this is something we've been talking about since we started this fucking thing, is this idea of the wrong son gets the blessing. I have to now trace this back and see what's up with all this. Joseph had faith in the resurrection, while Esau denied it, and hence God said, Joseph the devout shall be the one to visit merited punishment on Esau the unbelieving. Joseph associated with two wicked men, Potipharah and Pharaoh. So that was the captain of the Pharaoh's guard and Pharaoh. Potipharah was the guy who locked Joseph in prison when he was enslaved in Egypt. Yet he did not follow their examples. Esau associated with two pious men, his father and his brother. Yet he did not follow their example. Hence, said God, Joseph, who did not follow examples of the wicked men, shall visit punishment upon those who do not follow the example of pious men. Esau soiled with his life with lewdness and murder. Joseph was chaste and shunned bloodshed. Hence God delivered Esau's descendants into the hands of Joseph's descendants. And in this course of history, only the descendants of Joseph were victorious over the descendants of Esau. So will it be in the future, at the final reckoning between the angel of Esau and the angel of the Jews. The angel of Reuben will be rebuffed in the angel of Esau with these words, you represent one, I guess, spelling. You represent one who had illegal relations with his father's wife. The angels of Simeon and Levi will have to listen to this reproof. You represent people who slew the inhabitants of Shechem. And the angel of Judah will be repulsed with these words. Judah had illicit relations with his daughter-in-law. And the angel of the other tribes will be repulsed by Esau's angel when he points out to them that they took part in the selling of Joseph. The only one whom will not be able to be repulsed will be Joseph's angel, to whom he will be delivered and to whom he will be destroyed. And Joseph will be the flame and Esau will be the straw burned in the fire. So this also reminds me of, remember a couple weeks ago when we were talking about Jack Kirby's Fourth World? It's like Dark Side is that Dark Side and the New Gods would be like the bigger war going on, and there would be like the Forever People, and then like at the bottom would be like Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen. So this is fun because this is like the angels of all these tribes kind of bickering over each other. So this would be an extra added layer upon layer of the story. So you have the Hebrews down here who are all separated by their different tribes, and then the Amalek over here, And so on a higher level, all their angels are sitting around kind of complaining and arguing with one another, deciding the fates or influencing how these battles are going to unfold. I think it's such a cool idea. Moses now instructed Joshua in regard to his campaign against Amalek, saying, "Choose us out men and go out, fight with Amalek." The words "choose us" characterize the modesty of Moses, who treated his disciple Joshua as an equal. In these words, he taught us that the honor of our disciples should stand as high as our own. Joshua did not want first to expose himself to the danger and to leave the protection of the cloud. Remember this cloud, the 7 clouds of glory. But Moses said to him, "Abandon the cloud and set forth against Amalek, if ever thou dost hope to crown upon thy head." He commanded him to choose his warriors from among the pious and the God-fearing, and promised him that he would set a fast day for the following day to implore God in behalf of the good deeds of the patriarchs and the wives of the patriarchs to stand by Israel in this war. Joshua acted in accordance with these commands and sets out against Amalek to conquer, whom required not only skillful strategy but also adeptness in the art of magic. For Amalek was a great magician, and he knew the propitious and the unpropitious hour of each individual, and had his way regulated his attack against Israel. He'd attacked that at one at night, whose death had been predicted for a night, and him whose death had been preordained for a day, he attacked by day. But in this art, too, Joshua was his match, for he, too, knew how to time properly the attacks upon individuals, and he destroyed Amalek, his sons, the armies he himself commanded, and those under the leadership of his sons. And in the very heat of battle, Joshua treated his enemies humanely. He did not repay like with like. Far was it from him to allow Amalek's example in mutilating the corpses of his enemy. Instead, with a sharp sword, he cut off the enemy's head, an execution that does not dishonor. But only through the aid of Moses did Joshua, with his victory, Moses did not go out into battle, but through his prayer and through his influence upon the people, with inspiring them with faith, the battle was won. While the battle raged between Israel and Amalek, Moses was stationed at a height where, supported by the Levite Aaron and Judean Hur, the representatives of the 2 noble tribes of Levi and Judah, he fervently employed God's aid, and he said, "O Lord of the world, through me thou brought Israel out of Egypt. Through me hast thou cleft the sea, and through me thou wrought miracles. So do thou now work miracles for me, and lend victory to Israel. For I will know that while all other nations fight only to the 6th hour of the day, the sinful nations stand in battle ranks until sunset." Moses did not consider it sufficient to pray alone to God, but he raised his hands towards heaven as a signal for the whole nation to follow his example and trust in God. And as often as he then raised his hands to the heaven, and the people prayed with him, trusting that God would lend them victory, they were indeed victorious. As often, however, as Moses let down his hands and the people ceased prayer, weakening in their faith in God, Amalek conquered. But it was hard for Moses consistently to raise his hands, as this was God's way of punishing him for being somewhat negligent in the preparations of the war against Amalek. Hence, Aaron and Hur were obliged to hold up his arms and assist him in prayer. As furthermore he was unable to stand for that time, he seated himself on a stone, disdaining a soft, comfortable seat, saying, "As long as Israel is in distress, I shall share it with them." At evenfall, the battle was not yet decided. Therefore Moses prayed to God that he might stay the setting of the sun, and thus enable Israel to draw the battle to a close. And God granted this prayer, for the sun did not set until Israel had completely destroyed their enemy. Thereupon Moses blessed Joshua with these words. Some say, "The sun shall stand still for thy sake, as it did today for mine." And this blessing was later fulfilled at Gibeon, when the sun stood still to help Joshua in his battle against the Amorites. Although Amalek had not received the merited punishment from the hands of Joshua, still his enterprise against Israel had not been entirely unavailing. The miraculous exodus of Israel out of Egypt had, especially the cleaving of the sea, had created such alarm among these heathens that none among them had dared approach Israel. But his fear vanished as soon as Amalek attempted to compete in battle with Israel. Although it was terribly beaten, still the fear of the inaccessibility of Israel was gone. It was with Amalek as with the foolhardy wight who plunged into a scaling hot tub and scalded himself terribly, yet the tub became cold through his plunge into it. God was not content with the punishment Amalek received, and in time Moses swore by his throne and by his right hand that he would never forget Amalek's misdeeds. That in this world, as well as the time of the Messiah, he would be put visit punishment upon him and would completely exterminate him in the future world. So long as the seed of Amalek exists, the face of God is, as it were, covered, and will only then come to the view when the seed of Amalek shall have been entirely exterminated. God had at first left the war against Amalek in the hands of his people. Therefore, he bade Joshua, the future leader of the people, never to forget the war against Amalek. And if Moses had listened intently, he would have perceived from this command of God that Joshua was destined to lead the people into the promised land. But later, when Amalek took part in the destruction of Jerusalem, God himself took up the war against Amalek, saying, "By my throne I vow not to leave a single descendant of Amalek under the heavens. Yea, no one shall ever be able to say this sheep or that whether belonged to an Amalekite." God made Moses impress upon the Jews to repulse no heathen should he desire conversion, but never to accept an Amalekite as a proselyte. It was in consideration of this word that It was in consideration of this word of God that David slew the Amalekite, who announced him the death of Saul and Jonathan, for he saw in him only a heathen, although he appeared in the guise of a Jew. Part of the blame for the destruction of Amalek falls upon his father, Eliphaz, who used to say to Amalek, "My son, dost thou indeed know who will possess the world in the future world?" And Amalek paid no attention to this allusion to the future fortune of Israel. It is his father urged it no more strongly upon him, although it would have been his duty to instruct his son clearly and fully, that he should have said to him, "My son, Israel will possess this world as well as the future world. Dig wells then for their use and build road for them. so that they mayest be judged worthy to share in the future world. But Amalek had not been sufficiently instructed by his father. In his wantonness, he overtook to destroy the whole world, and God, who tries the reins and at the heart, had said to him, O thou fool, I created thee after all of the 70 nations, but for thy sins thou shalt be the first to descend to hell. To glorify the victory over Amalek, Moses built an altar which God called My Miracle, for the miracle God wrought against the Amalek in the war of Israel was, as it were, a miracle of God. For as long as the Israelites dwell in sorrow, God feels with them, and the joy for Israel is a joy for God. Hence, too, the miraculous victory over Israel's foe was a victory for God. All right. This has been the Abracast, and I've been John Towers. Hey, check out Abracast.com. Check out my deck of tarot cards. We got some, I don't want to say new ones. We got an expansion pack coming out. The Toth expansion pack. So there's like a lust card adjustment instead of, the lust card adjustment. Also the Aeon. So we got 4 new cards, and then also the 2 alternate magician cards are out there. Check them out. And I'm diligently working on a deck of oracle cards. So those have actually been fun. I didn't really know a lot about oracle cards, so I had to do a little bit of research on it. But so diligently working on those. We get some free kind of previews or whatever on my Instagram if you guys are interested in them. What else? I'll let Hilla tell you everything else. Thank you guys for listening. See you next week.
Thank you for listening, and we hope that you enjoyed the show. Please send an email or find us on social media and let us know what you think about the show. We would appreciate it if you would give us a 5-star rate and review wherever you find your favorite podcasts. You can find Stigmata Studios, graphic, novels, and comic books. Take control of your destiny. Understand your past. Put your present in context and know your future with a twist. Check out the Abracast Tarot Card Deck. Your body is your temple. So let's make sure you got a badass t-shirt on it. Variety of cool occult themed t-shirts. And other merch like stickers, wall art, mugs, and more. Welcome to the Red Archive. Get access to over 50 hours of archived episodes. More bonus audio. Additional exclusive content. All this for only $1 a month. Are you interested in the occult, history, conspiracy, and violence? Learn more at Abracast.com.